Today we're featuring relevant information about Afghanistan. This time we're presenting David Markland, a member of stopwar.ca, who spoke recently in Vancouver. If you agree with his position on Afghanistan, please register your vote on nowpolling.ca. If you don't agree with his position on Afghanistan, please register your vote on nowpolling.ca. If you have a different opinion than the ones already listed on nowpolling.ca, please add your opinion in a few words and vote for it. Let your choice be counted, because that is what direct democracy is all about.
Of course, our troops are there we don't have fighter jets or anything like that. That's being done by the Americans primarily, but also the British and the French. We have now the transport helicopters, which are working for various forces. They don't just transport Canadians. And they're based out of, there's two air bases in the country, one in Kandahar City, or outside of Kandahar City, and one near Kabul at Bagram Air Base. And of course the war has moved into Pakistan. There's been drone attacks for the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's around 40 such drone attacks are known. Recently, a former advisor to Condoleezza Rice, Kilcullen, I think his name is. He said that he says he's against the drone attacks. He said they killed 14. I think he said Al Qaeda operatives. I'm not really sure if that's likely, but in the course of killing those 14 high-value targets, he said that they've killed 700 Pakistani civilians. No one else has mentioned that number, as far as I know, which is a huge number. And now, as Derek mentioned, the Pakistani government has started an assault on these tribal areas, Pashtun areas that where the Taliban has a presence, the Swat Valley, and most recently, and other places too. There's a lot of ambiguity of Pakistan and these the Taliban, because of course the Taliban has a reputation of being something of a creature of the Pakistani military, and Pakistani politics largely involves the military pretending to do things, telling the Americans they're doing things, and hoping the Americans will believe them, or at least the Americans going along, because the Americans are okay as long as the Pakistani military claims they're doing what they claim to be doing. So the recent major assault on these Taliban-held areas, where over 1 million refugees now have poured out of, there's been some indication that they're a bit fake, that the population is being pushed out of the area so that they can have sort of fake battles, and they can tell the Americans that they're hitting the Taliban very hard, but there's been very sporadic reports out of there that indicate that perhaps there isn't really a lot of killing going on. Hard to say. And again, the question is, do the Americans buy that? The Americans really know what's going on? So usually what it seems most Pakistani generals are doing is trying to convince the Americans that they're doing what the Americans supposedly want. And it's a pretty mysterious. It's pretty mysterious because there isn't journalists involved or able to go there. Quite ambiguous. It's worth noting that the Pashtun areas in question within Pakistan represent, I think, only 4 or 8% of the Pakistani population. So while the establishment is drumming up fear about Taliban taking over nuclear-armed Pakistan, most sober observers don't see that as a very likely possibility. They're a very small minority. However, they are infiltrating even now into Karachi with threats, night letters against women, demanding that they cover up and this kind of thing. So it's not pretty. So that's just very briefly on Pakistan. Returning to the Afghan theater then, the U.S. and Britain have lately been shown to be using various weapons that people might be interested in knowing about. The Brits are using thermobaric bombs. Those are fuel-air explosives designed to, when you strike a building with a regular bomb, the blast is contained within whatever room it ends up in, but a fuel-air explosive can spread the impact much bigger, so they're actually designed to kill everybody in the building that you hit. Human Rights Watch or Amnesty says that these weapons are prone to being used in indiscriminate attacks. So they're not illegal, but they're questionable. White phosphorus, it turns out just a couple of weeks ago, the New York Times reporter reported rather matter-of-factly that the U.S. in fact uses white phosphorus as a weapon, which is illegal, although the Americans don't recognize it to be illegal. But they claim in their own operating procedures that they don't use white phosphorus as a weapon. They only use it as like smoke cover, illumination. Those are the permissible uses of white phosphorus in battle. You're not allowed to shoot it against people. You can't use its chemical and the chemical properties, the incendiary properties against people. Sorry, and when I say people, I mean insurgents in this case, civilians. Obviously, it's not cool to use them in civilian areas, but it's still illegal to use them simply as a weapon. And it came up just like I said a couple weeks ago that they're being used. Amnesty International just the other day notes that international forces are involved in indiscriminate bombings, which was illegal, of course, but that's their word for it. Also, targeted assassinations have been known to be going on for a couple of years, including one massacre where locals alleged that there was a nighttime raid of special forces, Afghan and foreign, presumably American special forces, who bayoneted children and killed people in their sleep, and a very, very bad scene. And I think 12 people, I think, is the common count of how many people died in this nighttime massacre. Also, one of the American generals in charge a few months back issued an order that drug traffickers should be targeted without evidence that they have connections with the insurgents. So it's just assumed that if you're a drug trafficker, you're connected with the insurgents and you're fair game to be killed. He later went back on that, but the initial order was supposedly in place at the time, so he, even though he corrected himself, it seems like it's probably de facto policy in any case. And home searches are another very questionable tactic that Afghans are, obviously very upset about. There's an interesting account from a Japanese journalist the other day about it looks like American forces commonly go up to places with medics, including female medics, and ask, can we come into your house and offer you medical care? And this one house owner presumably said no way, and they said, well, we'll only send female medics, So he said okay, and so they just sent in males along with the female medics, against what the promise was. And then the journalist watched as they left the house, the American soldiers lined up all the men against the wall and took retinal scans of each one of them. So they're going to put it on a database, and so if they capture or kill an insurgent, then they can measure it against the database and say, well, where did we meet this fellow previously? Then they can possibly target that village, and that has questionable legal foundations doing that.